Stepping out of the house, Tanya got into the waiting car and was currently heading to her second home, or rather to say, one hell of a madhouse, and thoughts about the recent events threatened to overload her brain from the realization of the situation's idiocy. That Grimmery, that bitch, what nerve! She barely managed to keep from annihilating her right then and there, in her brother's bed. After scurrying away with her tail between her legs yesterday, Tanya was already wondering where to look for them next. Should she storm the school? That would be too much. She wasn't a barbarian, and the rules of warfare must be followed, without involving civilians. But this morning, a surprise awaited her. She wanted to check her brother's room for clues, but found not only was he sleeping peacefully, but he was spooning Grimmery, naked. What is wrong with her? Does she have a bat's brain? It seems all this supernatural trash either had chicken brains or bat brains to actually show up at his home personally. If she had even a sliver of sense, she would have realized that whoever her enemy was, they would check his house first. Tanya was speechless. And yet, what is she trying to achieve with this? Does she want to tie him to herself this way? She had to agree here. Even if her brains were bat-like, some part of her was still working. This was indeed the most effective way to deal with her brother. But the one thing she couldn't understand was, why the hell did she want him in the first place? This question remained unanswered. And more importantly, this female rodent subspecies tried to hypnotize her at breakfast. If her parents hadn't been nearby, that same moment, a pair of new round 9mm holes would have appeared in her pretty little rodent head. Well, at least everything is clear now, and my brother has been found, so I shouldn't act rashly, especially since we caused enough of a ruckus yesterday. She even had to use her sacred gear. How much she wished she hadn't, but she had no choice. Her orb, the fruit of the imagination of a genius maniac, may the world rest his ashes, remained with her when she reincarnated in this world. As far as she understood, it merged with her soul and became some kind of sacred gear. She used to wonder why it was called that, but later, she learned that she wasn't the only one so special in this world. Apparently, Big Brother Pervert Y was involved or for some other reason, but now she could use her Elenium 95 whenever and wherever she wanted. This magical converter, which came with her from another world, significantly amplified her magical abilities and also served as a conductor for Being X's blessing. It was truly an astonishing invention by the mad genius Dr. Schugel. Unlike her dual-core Elenium 97, her Elenium 95 was quad-core, and its output power was an order of magnitude higher, a revolutionary technology. However, only she could use it. The requirements for the pilot were too high, so the project was shut down and the technology simplified to the dual-core Elenium 97. The only working model with full power remained with her. Now it seems it had undergone some kind of transformation when she came to this world. For example, now it was enough to simply call it mentally and it would materialize itself. A very convenient feature. In addition to this, there were many other benefits, but the problem also remained, and it was a serious one. The fact was that the Elenium 95 was a direct conduit for Being X's blessing, so every time she used it, Big Brother Pervert Y's disguise dropped. And in her situation, this was very dangerous. She was not ready for a direct confrontation with him yet. Therefore, she could not overuse the artifact. Who knew who might be that bastard's pawn? But I had no choice that time. She was lost in thought about her difficult fate when a chill ran through her body, a sensation as if she had been plunged headfirst into something sticky and slimy. She became uncomfortable, and her hand reflexively reached to adjust her skirt, pulling it lower. "Aren't the skirts in Kuo Academy a bit too short?" she complained, but suddenly a vague suspicion shot through her mind. Tanya looked up, and, as expected, her incompetent manager, instead of watching the road, was staring through the rear view mirror right at her legs. "That's it. the end for this pervert as soon as we reach the place. Ane-san, we're almost there. He spoke up. Pray, but not even being X will save you. They were approaching a massive Japanese-style mansion. The estate grounds were quite large, about 1 hectare. For Japan, this was a lot, especially considering the estate was right in the city, albeit on the outskirts. As soon as they reached the gate, screams were heard from above. Ani-san is here! Open up! The creak of the old wooden gates sounded. The estate was indeed ancient. As far as she knew, it was several centuries old. Driving onto the estate grounds, the car stopped in the parking lot. She got out, and the first thing she saw was an entire platoon of elite, hand-picked soldiers lined up before her. How much time she had spent training them, how many sleepless nights she had spent turning these embodiments of misunderstandings into true warriors. And she had achieved her result. She thought proudly, surveying her elite force of 7 people. Or she wished she could think that. Oh, how she wished. Tanya lowered her head, and tears welled up in her eyes. Only 7 of them. This is so little. And if you add to that... A familiar itch ran through her body, and her hand again reflexively reached for her skirt. She immediately checked herself. She couldn't show weakness in front of her subordinates. She raised her head and saw 7 pairs of eyes whose owners were smirking and staring at her legs. Damn perverts. No matter how much I discipline them, it somehow doesn't cure them. A sticky gaze also appeared from behind, especially around her lower back. Her incompetent manager was frankly drooling. He suddenly doubled over, lacking oxygen, as the little foot he'd been staring at so long drove into his stomach. And why, I wonder? Wasn't this what he wanted? Approaching him, she tripped this misunderstanding onto the ground. Then she stepped on his indecent face and began grinding that crooked nose which had already undergone several surgeries thanks to her efforts. Where are you staring, insect? No matter how many times I discipline you, it's not enough? Maybe it's time for more of your disciplinary training? The misunderstanding muttered. The strange gleam in his eyes struck her as odd. Is he asking for more? She applied a little more force, grinding his face into the asphalt, essentially using it as a floor mop. That lucky bastard. Yeah, the scumbag. And at that angle too? When that foot steps on you, it's beyond words. That goat is definitely asking for a dark Ellie discipline. Ani-san gave him such an honor. Faint whispers were heard from behind. Shut up, or you'll join him soon. For some reason, a row of smirks spread across their faces at that moment. What the hell? Why? Time after time, I conduct prevention, and it's never enough for them? Tanya could only frown.
Well, at least they perform their tasks and maintain subordination. But she thought it might be necessary to triple the intensity of their training. Coo. A smile spontaneously stretched across her face at these thoughts. A year ago, when she first took over this Yakuza clan, she thought one of her goals was finally achieved. And she truly achieved it, obtaining the necessary human resources and connections to the underworld. But for some reason, after that unforgettable night she put them through, their attitude towards her completely changed. And the clan itself, only a name. They had a good mansion and even a decent lineage, but they barely had a dozen subordinates, and everything was twisted. Ane-san, your orders? A well-built middle-aged man, one of the 7 mentioned, approached her. He had an old scar across his face, covering his eye, which gave him the appearance of a bandit. In fact, he was one until he joined her human resources. Right. Take me to the boss. We have a full schedule today. And you should pray to the Lord that I won't have time for you today. Tanya drilled the assembled elite squad with her gaze. Their smiles faded. But don't celebrate yet. As soon as we finish our business, you will experience hell personally. The smiles returned. What the hell is going on? But pushing aside extraneous thoughts, Tanya followed the man. This one also had his quirks, but he stood out well against the others. She appointed him squad commander. First, he was the head of the rapid response team. He performed well this time, as did the other fighters. That was the only reason she still tolerated them. Ane-san, perhaps coffee first. No time. Ane-san, here's the documentation you requested. Later. Ane-san, we need to conduct an inventory in the warehouse. I said later. Take me to the boss. This matter is urgent. What is that pervert so busy with that you're dragging your feet? As you say, Ane-san. For some reason, he looked dejected. Approaching the doors of the spacious room, the boss's office, she heard voices inside. Dad, why are you doing this to me? Why? What did I do to deserve this? A woman's hysterical shriek was heard. It has to be done, daughter. It's your own fault. It's very important to check how you've grown. Ha 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 ha. A man's bass voice sounded. Tss, tss, and whip cracks followed. Come on, daughter. Endure. Be strong. What did Dad teach you? Try harder. Tsh, tsh. But why? Why are you Female crying mixed with sobs was heard. That's Oda? What is happening in there? What is that old pervert up to? I'll shove his own balls down his throat right now. Oda was one of her most valuable acquisitions in this monastery of perversion. She slammed her foot into the door with all her might. It burst inward, and her eyes were met with a middle-aged man in just his underwear, tied by his arms and legs to this wall. He was dangling like a scarecrow, his entire body covered in bleeding scars. A girl about 16, 17 years old, with long black hair and an amber streak in her bangs, was walking around him in circles. She was wearing short denim shorts and a mini top. She was whipping the man, mixing her sobs with the action. Why don't you suffer, sob? Why can't I punish you, sob? Why are you bastard, just grinning with your stupid perverted face, huh? Sob. Oda wiped hot tears streaming down her sweet little face with her hand. What can I do, daughter? You are still too young. I raised the best qualities in you with all my love, but you are still too inexperienced to satisfy your dad. Your efforts are insufficient. They are completely insufficient to compare with a true master. But you must overcome this obstacle and continue to strive for perfection. Learn from our Ani-san. Suddenly, he interrupted the educational process when his gaze fell upon Tanya. His eyes nearly popped out of their sockets, and streams of saliva threatened to flood the room. The girl turned, saw Tanya too, and hung onto her shoulders, choking with tears. Ani-san, help! That pervert! How can he be so cruel? I've been whipping him for hours, and he doesn't care. Why can't I even punish him? Sob. Tears streamed from her brown eyes. Sob, please, help Ane-san. Punish him. Tanya's brain hung at 0.5% data processing. Ane-san, Ane-san. The cries of the misunderstanding nailed to the wall were heard. Please teach my ungrateful daughter true mastery. I'll give you anything you want. The mansion, the people, even myself. All for the sake of the family. His saliva sprayed like Niagara Falls. His eyes looked more like those of the doomed on the front line. Although I've been completely yours for a long time, Ane-san, dedicated to you body and soul, and everything I own is yours too, but I'll do it again as many times as it takes. Just fulfill this insignificant one's request. Oda. Tanya stroked her head gently. The girl lifted her tear-stained amber eyes.
Let's go take care of business. Forget about this pervert. They left through the door, but the frantic cries of this inexplicable being could be heard even at the other end of the mansion. Yoshi's recovery and the system analysis. Reaching the second half of the estate, a new door appeared before them, but this time it was surrounded by an aura of calm. She could breathe a sigh of relief. They entered. Inside were two people. A large, Slavic-looking man was sleeping on the bed, and next to him sat a black-haired girl with an emerald streak, wearing an antique kimono. In her hands was a refined blade gleaming with crystal silver light. She passed it over the man. The girl was absolutely identical to the companion outside, except for her green eyes. An aura of calm and refinement emanated from her as her palm passed over the transparent blade, absorbing streams of dark shadows emanating from the man's body. Status: Name: Yoshi, Alexei Popovich. Race: Human. Age: 18 years. Level: 33. Status: Tatiana Hudo's Human Resource. Evolutionary Index: D. E. Characteristics: Strength: 30, 20. Agility: 10, 6. Stamina: 30, 20. Energy: 10, 6. Will: 13, 8. Achievements: Hero's Reincarnation. 1. A great ancestor did not withhold his legacy from his descendant. Certain special abilities may awaken under specific circumstances. Knight. 1. This person knows what honor and loyalty are. Following his internal convictions, he swore allegiance to the person chosen by his heart. Acting in her name, the effectiveness of abilities increases. Rejected. 2. This person has passed many trials in his life. He has many internal scars. Under certain circumstances, both a decline and an increase in abilities are possible. Braveheart. 2. In critical situations, the probability of awakening hidden powers is increased. Effects: Magic poisoning level 1. Harmful energy has seeped into the body and prevents her body from recovering normally. Evolutionary degradation level 1. Drop in evolutionary index by 1 stage due to harmful effects. Characteristics are forcibly lowered. How was the process going, Musashi? The girl looked up at Tanya. With mixed success, mistress. You know this is not my specialization. I don't even know if this will help him. It helps, I can see it. Don't doubt yourself. Your abilities are best suited for the situation. Even if slowly, the process is ongoing. The magical poisoning is gradually subsiding. He should wake up soon. Tanya looked down at the giant. Yoshi, he overdid it. She ran her hand through his light brown hair. She couldn't afford to lose him. He was a very valuable human resource with immense potential. Only some issues with his character, and he hadn't fully mastered his gear. But that was fixable. The main thing was to give him the proper motivation, and he would be the best living shield one could dream of. This time, he absorbed too much of Gramarye's black energy. As a result, it was now corroding his body from the inside. It was necessary to remove the excess to a level that would not have a detrimental effect on him, which Musashi was now doing. As a result, the level of energy poisoning had already dropped from level 2 to level 1. What an unpleasant effect this energy has. Not only did the poisoning slow down the recovery process, but it also lowered his evolutionary index, which severely weakened the body. This invention, Big Brother wise design, was truly convenient. As unpleasant as it was to admit, it was a work of genius. It took effort to understand it, but it was worth it. For example, as Tanya understood it,
The key factor was precisely this evolutionary index. Its main feature was that, upon increase, it significantly increased the effectiveness of basic characteristics, acting as a coefficient. How so? Well, for example, an ordinary person's evolutionary index is F. The system says its coefficient is x 0.8. This means that the effectiveness of a strength of 5 will work as 5 times 0.8 equals 4. That is, it will work as if the person has 4 basic units of strength. Basic unit of strength is how she designated the standard unit of characteristics in Big Brother Y's system. Why does it work this way? She hadn't figured it out fully, but perhaps it was something like unlocked potential or something like that. And so it was with all stats and abilities. But that wasn't all. The most interesting part began with the increase of the evolutionary index. If a person met certain conditions, they could evolve. The entire organism became stronger, and the effectiveness of characteristics and abilities significantly increased. The next level, E, had a times 1.3 coefficient. So, taking strength 5 as an example, 1.3 times 5 equals 6.5. If you compare the ranks, F rank of 4 versus E rank of 6.5, there was already such a gap with a 1 rank difference. What would happen when the stats were high, and when the gap between the EIs was more than 1 rank? The difference would be exponential, like between an infant and an adult. Furthermore, the phenomenon of such evolution wasn't the system's prerogative. As Tanya understood it, it was the natural evolution of different species, which was possible under certain conditions. Big Brother Y simply systematized it and assigned numerical values. Yoshi's EI was actually higher, but it dropped to E rank due to poisoning, which is why his recovery was much slower. There was another pleasant feature. With each evolution, a person received an additional characteristic. Which one varied? Yoshi's were energy and will. The first, the amount of energy available to him, the basic reserve. This stat greatly affects the volume of either magical energy, ki, life energy, or any other kind of energy. Will, the stat of overcoming, so to speak, greatly affects a person's endurance and resilience. But even if a person had strong endurance, it wouldn't necessarily unlock during evolution. So, the difference between ranks was also expressed in characteristics. Although how the characteristics worked exactly, she hadn't figured it out herself.
How much information Tanya had learned thanks to the system. It had truly helped her immensely in this world. No matter what a scumbag Big Brother Pervert Y was, you couldn't take away his genius. She was truly lucky with mad scientists, to say the least. She was still worried about his words that she was the system tester, meaning there should be problems, and that was somewhat frightening, as they usually led to very original consequences. You could never guess what you would get from these mad scientists. Fortunately, there were no major catches yet, but that was only yet. Lowering vigilance would be too costly. Tanya had been there before. "Ane-san, please forgive my unworthy behavior," the voice of one pervert was heard from behind. Oda flinched behind Tanya, trying to hide behind her small shoulders. Did she really expect that to work? "Go make key. We will start the discussion now." She drilled him with her gaze, struggling to suppress the urge to squish that annoying insect right there. "As you command, Ane-san." The boss immediately darted into the next room. 5 minutes later, everyone was in their places. Oda sat nearby, clinging to her arm. Musashi continued the healing, shooting naked murderous intent at Oda. And the boss, crawling at her feet, lovingly polished Tanya's shoes until they gleamed. "Stop! What is he doing?" The boss suddenly doubled over from the lack of breath as the polished shoe drove into his stomach. Ignoring this minor incident, Tanya began. "Well, even though we failed to capture the target last time, it doesn't matter now. The target suddenly showed up at home hugging the perpetrator." Tanya took a sip of coffee.
What? 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 It felt as if even Yoshi had a question mark above his head. It was no surprise that everyone reacted this way. The situation was completely ridiculous. Streams of saliva, the annoying attention somewhere near her feet wouldn't cease. A familiar itch made itself known. Tanya immediately solved that problem. God. After disinfecting her shoe with a napkin, she continued. Even I didn't expect such a turn, but it is a fact. My brother and that very Rias Grumori were found in his bed this morning. Tanya added milk to her coffee. But Ane-san, what was the point of kidnapping him then? What was her goal? And that feathered man, we still don't know who he is. And what the hell was going on there in general? Oda spoke up. Oda, how can you not understand such obvious things? Your great ancestor would turn over in his grave to hear this. Musashi looked at her reproachfully. Obviously, they had different goals. Isn't that right, mistress? Precisely. Apparently, the goal of those black feathered hens was to kill my brother. At the same time, Grumori's goal was to save him. But even that isn't so simple. This Grumori turned him into her likeness, a demon. Have you heard of them? Ahem, ahem, the voice came from the curled-up creature in the corner of the room. Ane-san, allow me. Boss, if I notice a lack of subordination again, not even the fact that you are the formal head of the Miyanagi clan will save you. She turned her gaze at him. That would be tempting if it were by your hand, but Ane-san, I want to speak to the point. Proceed. Ane-san, I understand you may not fully comprehend who we are talking about. There are many different supernatural beings. The clan knows about this, but only I am aware of the details. Even my daughters, Oda and Musashi, are not aware of it, as they haven't encountered them before. In this world, there are the so-called three great factions: angels, fallen angels, and demons. I suspect you ran into the fallen angels. Their distinguishing feature is black feathered wings. And demons, of course. He finished seriously. And why am I only finding this out now? Tanya raised her voice. I didn't think it was that important, and I thought you were aware, he stammered. Bam! Tanya slammed her foot on the floor. Not important? How can this not be important? This is critical information. Tanya shook her head. Well, it's too late to regret. Tell me everything you know. 5 minutes later, after an engaging account, hysterical laughter emanating from Tanya's mouth echoed through the room. How amusing! So a certain biblical God created angels as his helpers to live according to his commandments, but in the end, some turned away from him, turned their weapons on him, and became demons. And the others fell because they didn't live up to his expectations and became fallen angels. And this led to a massive carnage that engulfed the entire world? Tears even came to Tanya's eyes. Everyone in the room looked at her a bit strangely. Musashi handed her a handkerchief. Tanya didn't stop, but accepted the handkerchief. Excuse my lack of restraint. It's just so amusing. The nostalgia is overwhelming. She wiped her eyes with a smile. What a familiar sight this was. Tanya had seen a similar scenario somewhere. Where could it be? Why, of course, in her past world. Could it be that she had found the main clue to being X? Wow, the biblical God, hey? So that's who he is here? Amusing. But what do they care about your brother, Ani-san? If so few of them are left, they should just stay where they are. But yes, although it was amusing, it was time to return to the main question. But she needed to confirm her theory later, and if it turned out to be true, she could start acting. Oda, is your head just for decoration? Musashi pierced her with a scorching gaze. The mistress clearly said they turned him, which means they have a way to increase their numbers with humans. Good conclusion, Musashi. Tanya nodded, which made her beam. But that's not all, so Oda's question is still relevant. Why him specifically? Are there not enough people around? So that means
Yes, it's not that simple. Something is behind all this, and our upcoming task will be precisely to find out what it is. Ane-san, what exactly are we going to do? Nothing. For now, we need to gather information and find out the demon's motives. First, we will simply observe Grimory's and fallen angels' actions. I have a clue where those feathered hens are hiding. Is it that church, mistress? Precisely. But it's too early to rush in there. We don't know the enemy's numbers or their goals. Plus, we need to wait for Yoshi to recover and figure out what benefit we can derive from them. A smile bloomed on her face. Mistress, that look of yours. Musashi's breathing quickened and her cheeks flushed. For you, mistress, anything. Noticing her strange reaction, she immediately returned to a serious expression. All right, that's settled. Now let's address more pressing issues. What's the status of our finances? She cast a glance at the boss. Ane-san, how can you doubt us? We are a very ancient clan with a great legacy. Our roots go back to... Stop stalling and get to the point. Yes, well, we are, of course, almost broke, Ane-san. Our great and ancient legacy is entirely in your hands and depends on them. At the moment, only your contracts bring in significant income. She lowered her head into her palms. It's the usual, of course. They truly were an ancient clan with a great legacy and tons of connections, but they had no idea how to handle finances. They were ridiculously poor. At least they hadn't squandered their last legacy in the form of the mansion. What hopes I had. I thought that with such resources, there would be a ton of opportunities. And the result? She was carrying this monastery of perversion on her small shoulders just to keep them from bankruptcy. Is it even legal to exploit children like this? Child labor is prohibited by law. But no, an entire locomotive of sponging perverts was riding on her small shoulders. Suddenly, the man with the scar on his face, standing calmly in the corner of the room, first spoke up. Ane-san, the last operation required significant expenditure. He handed her a document with the report. At this rate, I'm afraid we won't last a month. All our hopes are on you, Ane-san. She took it with a sigh and scanned the report. The numbers were staggering. That damned Grimory. But there was nothing to do. The expenses were indeed high. Weapons and ammunition weren't cheap. Everything had to be obtained through the black market, and that was more expensive than working directly with suppliers. In modern Japan, you couldn't just buy weapons. It was good that she had many familiar middlemen and even discounts, as her connections were significant. But money was still catastrophically lacking. What to do? How to get additional funds? The proposal from Levy Chan immediately came to mind. Some internal part of her was drawn to that easy path. No, I don't even want to think about it. But common sense prevailed. She knew that if she accepted that person's proposal, it would be a one-way street. But the money is needed. Tears welled up in her eyes. Oda lowered her face in embarrassment. Musashi's eyes shone with a strange gleam. Mistress, perhaps? She stroked her blade with a smile and the gaze of Jack the Ripper. Perhaps we can find another target. A ritual.